China just pulled off something that left NASA and SpaceX stunned. After orbital debris cracked the Shenzhou 20 window, 3 Tiangong astronauts were left stranded without a safe escape vehicle. Western media hammered China with criticism. But here's where it gets interesting. China responded with a rescue plan in just 9 days. How does that compare to the 9 months Boeing's Starliner crew spent waiting? And what does this say about who's really winning the space race right now? Welcome to Space Update 24H. Let's dive right in. Here's what actually happened. On November 14th, the Shenzhou 21 crew arrived at Tiangong, but their arrival created an unprecedented crisis. China had used the incoming spacecraft to emergency evacuate the previous crew because their return vehicle, Shenzhou 20, had been struck by orbital debris. The impact left a crack in the outer heat-resistant glass of the crew cabin window. During re-entry, temperatures reached thousands of degrees. If that crack spreads, superheated plasma could penetrate the inner layers, depressurize the spacecraft, and turn it into a death trap. China made a calculated choice. They brought the first crew home immediately, leaving the new 3-person crew on Tiangong with 0 functional escape vehicles. For the first time in the station's history, astronauts were orbiting Earth with no way down. What would happen if a fire broke out or a critical system failed? The international response was swift and harsh. Other spacefaring nations accused China of recklessly endangering their astronauts' lives, and the criticism stung. China needed to act fast to restore both safety and credibility. Just 3 days after the crew became stranded, on November 17, an airspace closure notice appeared. China was preparing to launch Shenzhou 22, an uncrewed rescue spacecraft, on November 24th from Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. The timeline was remarkable. The crew was stranded on November 14th, and the replacement would dock around November 25th. Roughly 9 days from crisis to solution. But was this impressive speed or dangerous desperation? To answer that, we need to look at how NASA handled a similar situation just months earlier. In June 2024, NASA discovered serious helium leaks and thruster failures on Boeing's Starliner after it docked with the ISS carrying astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore. The spacecraft technically had a 96 to 97% chance of returning safely, but NASA Administrator Bill Nelson made a decisive call. They weren't willing to accept that remaining 3 to 4% risk with 2 veteran astronauts' lives on the line. Starliner was completely removed as a return option. NASA worked with SpaceX to reconfigure the Crew 9 mission, launching only 2 astronauts instead of 4, leaving 2 empty seats for Sunita and Butch. They also extended the docked Crew 8 Dragon by nearly a month to ensure the ISS always had an emergency lifeboat available. But here's the critical difference. SpaceX's launch schedule was already packed. They couldn't simply accelerate without disrupting dozens of commitments. NASA agreed to wait because the ISS has robust life support systems. It wasn't until March 2025 that Dragon Crew 9 finally brought everyone home. 9 months total. The response couldn't have been more different. SpaceX and Elon Musk were celebrated as heroes. Former President Trump praised Musk publicly and even joked about paying the astronauts' salaries for the extra months. Sunita and Butch themselves said they never felt stranded. They became the longest-staying U.S. astronauts in a single mission and treated it as the experience of a lifetime. Meanwhile, China's 9-day response drew nothing but criticism. The reason comes down to one fundamental principle: speed doesn't equal safety. For those 9 critical days, Tiangong had 0 emergency escape vehicles. If anything had gone wrong, those 3 astronauts had only one option: climb into the damaged Shenzhou 20 with a cracked window and hope it held together during re-entry. Would you take that gamble with your life? China's space agency tried to justify their decision with technical analysis. They reviewed images, ran simulations, and performed wind tunnel testing. Their conclusion was clear: the crack posed too much risk for human re-entry. If it spread and exposed inner layers to plasma, the window could fail catastrophically. Yet for 9 days, this damaged spacecraft was their crew's only potential escape route. That's not contingency planning. That's crossing your fingers and hoping nothing goes wrong. The contrast reveals something deeper about the 2 approaches to spaceflight. NASA took 9 months because they had the infrastructure, resources, and partnerships to prioritize safety above public perception. China rushed because they didn't have that luxury. Their response exposed weaknesses that go beyond one debris strike: inadequate shielding, insufficient backup planning, and a willingness to accept risks other nations wouldn't tolerate. Consider this. In 5 years of Crew Dragon operations, SpaceX has never dealt with a debris strike that actually damaged a crewed spacecraft. The closest call came during Crew 2 in 2021, when debris passed within 1 to 2 kilometers of the capsule. The crew suited up as a precaution, but nothing happened. Even if impact had occurred, Crew Dragon's layered Whipple shielding would likely have absorbed it. That's the difference between designing for safety and designing to meet deadlines. While this orbital drama unfolded, the competitive landscape on Earth was shifting dramatically. On November 17th, Blue Origin successfully landed its New Glenn booster for the first time. Jeff Bezos celebrated with a flood of social media posts, clearly trying to catch Elon Musk's attention. But Blue Origin isn't stopping at celebrations. They're planning to reuse that exact booster for their next launch in early 2026. Timing that happens to align perfectly with SpaceX's first Starship Block 3 flight. Coincidence or calculated pressure? Blue Origin has struggled with ambitious timelines before, and refurbishing a first stage could delay everything. But CEO Dave Limp says the risk is worth it. They're not chasing cadence yet. They're building infrastructure, aiming to produce roughly 21st stages per year before making promises about rapid launches. It's a measured approach that prioritizes foundation over flash. The real question isn't whether Blue Origin can compete with SpaceX. It's whether American companies will keep fighting each other while Chinese firms collaborate and advance. Deep Blue Aerospace went from serious development start to static fire tests in just 3 years. Their Nebula 1 second stage recently completed a 308-second burn, validating everything from fueling procedures to pressurization systems. That's the speed you get when government and industry work together instead of suing each other. And that's exactly what's happening in the US. The SpaceX Blue Origin rivalry goes back to 2014, when Blue Origin sued over launchpad usage, then escalated in 2021 when they sued NASA over the $2.9 billion Artemis contract, forcing a 2.5-month delay. These aren't just business disputes. They're strategic obstacles that slow down America's entire space program while China pulls ahead. What could these companies accomplish if they actually work together instead of fighting in courtrooms? The bigger picture here reveals two completely different philosophies colliding in orbit. NASA chose 9 months of patience because they could afford to prioritize safety over speed. China chose 9 days because they had to prove something to the world, even if it meant accepting risks that Western programs would never tolerate. And here's the irony. While China rapidly responded to their crisis, the U.S. government shut down on October 1st, 2025, furloughing over 15,000 NASA employees over budget disputes. Meanwhile, China launched Tiangong 2 for asteroid sample return and announced plans to expand Tiangong with a 6th module in early 2026. While American politicians argue and companies fight in court, China builds infrastructure and advances capabilities at a pace we haven't seen since Apollo. But America still has one advantage China can't match: SpaceX. With Falcon 9, Dragon Starship, and Starlink serving millions globally, Musk's company represents innovation that keeps America competitive. The question is whether one company can carry an entire nation's space ambitions while government stays gridlocked and rivals stay divided. China's 9-day rescue shocked the world, but it exposed the cracks in their system. Speed without safety is just recklessness with better marketing. The real winners won't be those who move fastest. They'll be those who build systems robust enough to handle crisis without gambling human lives. So here's the bottom line. This isn't about who launches faster. It's about who builds smarter, safer, and more sustainable. Right now, that race is far closer than most people realize. If this opened your eyes to what's really happening above us, smash that like button and drop a comment with your take. Can America stay ahead, or is China's approach the future? Subscribe to Space Update 24 hours and hit the notification bell so you never miss the developments reshaping humanity's future in space. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.